June is Stroke and Aphasia Awareness Month in Canada. A stroke happens about every 5 minutes, and yet many people don't know exactly what a stroke is. A stroke happens when a rupture or blockage stops blood flow to any part of your brain, damaging brain cells. The effects of a stroke depend on the part of the brain that is damaged and the amount of damage done. For example, a stroke in the language center of the brain may cause aphasia, which typically happens in about 30% of stroke survivors. My guests today will provide important information on how to identify the signs of a stroke, the immediate steps that should be taken to minimize its impact, and how aphasia has affected a stroke survivor. I'm pleased to welcome Emilia Leslie, Program Coordinator with VON Stroke Services, and Dan Cormier, a stroke survivor. So hello, Emilia and Dan. A stroke is definitely a medical emergency, and acting fast is critical. So let's start with the signs of a stroke and what fast means.
So we ask people to remember to be fast. That acronym can help us remember the signs of stroke. We want to look for any facial drooping, ask the person to smile. Is there any one-sided weakness? We can look in the mirror. A for arms. We want to look for that, again, that one-sided weakness. We can ask the person to raise their arms. S for speech. We can ask the person to say something, look for any slurring of speech or jumbled speech. And T for time. That disruption of blood flow, as you mentioned, Jenny, that blockage or burst disrupts that oxygen getting to that part of the brain. So that creates that brain damage in that area. So the longer we wait for treatment and intervention, the more of the person that could be lost, the potential risks from the effects could be more severe.
On average, 1.9 million brain cells die each minute of a stroke. So timing is critical to get to the help that you need.
It really is. That ischemic stroke, that clot, is the most commonly occurring type of stroke, and that getting to the right center in the right time is really important, because there's a clot busting medication within the right window of time we can take to help again reduce those impacts from stroke. So when we call 911, if we suspect that ourselves or someone else is having a stroke, letting them know we suspect stroke, because then the dispatcher can alert the ambulance and the closest medical center with a stroke designation to have those treatments and medications ready for us.
Mm-hmm. And it's important to call 911, not drive yourself to the hospital.
My second stroke, people knew what fast meant, and I was lucky enough to be in the morning working, and they saw the signs, and from the time they called to the time I was in the surgery getting the clot removed was 43 minutes. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. So it does have some real repercussions to your wellness.
So aphasia, maybe we can talk about that. That affects your speech.
It does, and it does still me. The first time I had a stroke, it really affected me. It took me about 6 months to talk and be understood. The third time, same thing. It was another process, but aphasia affects so many people in different ways. Every stroke is so different. The first time I had aphasia, yes meant no. No meant yes. Colors were just a mystery. You know, there was no connection between my thought and my voice. It was very frustrating, and that took some therapy, some therapists I knew, some speech therapists to build me, gave me the tools to learn to talk again. And the same with the second time was more like a brain fog. There was thoughts there, but again, it was more to do with just a communication. I could speak, but I couldn't get the words out.
Mm-hmm. So obviously rehab, lengthy rehab is critical.
Crucial.
And I guess, Emilia, that's where the Victoria Order of Nurses can come in and help.
Yeah, so we know a lot about aphasia recovery as well as stroke recovery that both take time. That could be months or years like Dan said, everyone's aphasia and everyone's stroke is different. Could affect our ability to produce speech, but also understand speech and our reading or writing, but never our intelligence. Folks can come and see us if they have aphasia, but also if they don't have aphasia and want to learn more about accessible communication strategies, like giving each other time in conversations to process and respond, sticking to one topic at a time, or using other methods to communicate, like gestures or drawing, keeping the marker and paper handy for writing.
It's interesting because with aphasia, there's a lot of parties, like family and friends, that have no idea what to deal with. And to have the VON and therapists to give you the tools, and you need that educated person to give you the right knowledge to proceed, because doing it yourself is just a waste of time. And I found that a lot of times, like in the groups with the VON, we meet in person, we meet online. There's a lot of tricks and trades you pick up with each other in conversations. You see somebody succeeding, you say, what helped you? And it's just that motivation, an insight and motivation between our their fellow survivors. And myself, I still trip on words. I try to pace my voice, but my thoughts are twice as fast as my speech.
So
That's part of it.
The whole process can be very frustrating because
Frustrating is an
it
understatement.
your intelligence or intellect isn't affected, but the communication just doesn't happen.
That's the hardest part, is your soul, your person is the same. You just have a whole different toolbox. You're just a different person, and you have to live with the new tools you have to work with. And it's hard. It's tough. So it's in groups, it's really important to have people around you talking through. And it's amazing, some people come out with something and you go, I never thought that would work. And give it a try. Don't get discouraged, because it's a long process. It's not like a stitch or a broken bone where you have a cast or you have stitches and 2 months later you're laughing about it. This is a long healing process.
Invisible signs of a stroke?
Yeah, Dan mentioned like the change and like the person is changed after stroke. So that comes a lot of times with grief for this, both the stroke survivor and caregiver, which we have services and supports for. So at group, that grief, for example, is something that we speak to, but we can't necessarily see that in each other.
No, it's really hard, because the thing is you changed. But your spouse, your sibling, or your significant other has a new partner. That's tough. It's a new person. They didn't plan for this. They barely get along with the first one. So, you sit back and go, this is life-changing. And the one thing I want to stress too is that invisible part I'm not saying it's always mental, but it is a significant mental part of it. Because strokes affected me both physically and mentally. The mental part you can hide. You can bury it, you can, for not long term, but you can hide it. Where the physical stuff is usually something like walking. I learned to walk again. Not well, but what I learned. Depression, anxiety, I've had both of them. They're tough. They're really tough.
And particularly for you, because you've had 4 strokes.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us about that?
Like the first one was physical and mental, and it took me about 7 months to get up and walking around and make noise. Second one was really lucky. Like I said, people at work knew I was having a stroke, and they were able to get the clot out. And the problem was, about 3 weeks after, I thought I brushed that one off. 3 years after my first stroke. And then 3 weeks after that stroke, I got anxiety. And I had to get therapy quickly, because it was debilitating. And then my third stroke was just, it was in my sleep. So let me tell you, that trip to the washroom was interesting. But I knew I had a stroke and got to the hospital. And the fourth stroke, driving. Believe it or not, just driving. and my left side just dropped. And my throat, this one affected my throat, kind of made this, they call it aphasia. It's basically paralyzed on one side. And I got depression. And you're sitting there going, again, PCH has great therapists and resources, and they built me back up with all the right tools. And I'm sitting here today.
Now you have a medical condition that makes you more prone to having a stroke.
Well, it's, I don't know what to say. They're still working on me.
We think about the different types of risk factors for
Yeah.
stroke, and knowing that there's kind of the big three: diabetes, cholesterol, and blood pressure. But we know that heart conditions can be a major risk factor
And
as well.
I wasn't very good to myself. And originally, I've lost a lot of weight. I eat well now and I exercise religiously. But I did have a defective heart, and I did have arrhythmia, the contributing factor for sure. And even after losing weight, exercising, doing everything right, I still had it because they found I had a defective wall in my heart. I had a Watchman device placed in February. And it seems to be helping me quite a bit, so I'm hoping that's it.
I should mention that you have worked on an exceptional stroke survivor, stroke caregiver handbook that hopefully will be published soon with some great information for survivors and caregivers, and how to live through and thrive following.
If it helps anybody, it's worth it.
Yeah, and people can check out Dan's story right now if they like. It's available online through the Stroke Network of Southeastern Ontario's website, Dan's Story. And so you can check out the Stroke Network of Southeastern Ontario's website for that right now. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming in,
Thank you,
Dan,
Gladys.
Amelia.
Thank you so much.